to extend the conversation that we've been having about inclusion and disabilities in the church. And I'm joined now by three people who are experts in medical fields. So I just want you to start by introducing yourselves and letting us know what your area of expertise is, or what is your profession. Teo.
So my name is Tayo Adewumi. I'm a family physician or general practitioner.
My name is Taiwo Adewumi. I'm a child and adolescent intellectual disability psychiatry, and my area of special interest is in neurodevelopmental disorders.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm Dr. Loisia Ogle. I have a bachelor's in medicine and a postgraduate diploma in forensic medicine. I've also got a master's degree in special and additional learning needs, but I'm also a parent of someone with disabilities.
Yeah. Amazing. And I am a teacher, so I'll leave it at that. So what we want to look at now is thinking about the church and the culture in the church when it comes to disabilities, inclusion and that, and thinking back to how things have changed or developed over time. So I might get, Tayo, if you'd like to start with that one, thinking about, some experiences you may have had in the past or what you've seen as changes, maybe for good, maybe for bad, but any changes with how the church approaches disability.
Thank you, Katie. I actually have two examples or two personal experiences. So the first one comes from our church in the UK. I was involved in kids' work at that time while we were there, and I was teaching the 3 to 5 year group. And there was a certain family I got to know later that they weren't coming to church regularly because they had a 3-year-old son who was nonverbal and he was on the spectrum. But then somehow they started coming to church, and then they could drop their son at the kids' work. But one of his older siblings always stayed with him. So that was nice because in a way it was helpful to have someone who was familiar staying with him. And that was the way we got introduced to having somebody who was on the spectrum, even being involved in church. It was also good to see that the parents could also come to church. At least they could have that time of fellowship and at least be assured that their son was being looked after. We didn't probably get it right, but it was good to be introduced into it that way, and it worked. But something else was that you sometimes felt bad that his sister or his brother had to miss their own service just to stay with their brother. So I tried to include them even in what we were doing, so at least they still were there not just to support their brother, but also to be blessed as well. But with time, and that happened when we left the church, when we had to move country, that they introduced the body system, which I actually got to witness when I went back to Durham a few months ago. And another experience that I had was when I was in kids' work in Qatar. A young boy, and I think I was teaching 7 to 8 at that time. So I had a class, and I was the only one there. I didn't have a helper, but I saw that there was a mom there with her son. So that's how we got introduced to the fact that there was this boy in the church who had special needs. But eventually, the leadership got wind of it, and they introduced a body system, which worked really well. And I think the way it used to work was that the mom will text the leadership when they're coming to church, and there will always be someone who stayed with their son. But for my own personal experience, and what really blessed me, but also showed my ignorance, even though I have medical knowledge, was that there was one time we were in the classroom. Obviously, you have so many kids and you're trying to get them involved, get the message across. But then I asked at one time 2 different experiences with him. I said, did anybody want to pray to start the lesson? And obviously, so many kids had their hands up, and his hand was up. I was like, oh God, what do I do? But I didn't have peace to ignore him. So I just said, okay, go ahead. And he prayed, and I was so blessed. And I think for me, it just showed my ignorance, because I thought because my boy in Durham was nonverbal, I just assumed that he was nonverbal. So it was just such a blessing to see him respond in that way, engage in that way. And obviously, when we were doing other things, I think there was another time that I said, who wanted to read on another day, who wanted to read out the memory verse that had been written on the board. Obviously, he had his hand up on that day, and I didn't hesitate to call call him, and he read so beautifully. So I've just seen that progression and the development in different churches at different times, but it's just good to see that it's becoming a place where children of determination and families with these children are feeling more and more settled and more welcomed.
Yeah. I must say, Daniel always loves to pray when he can at kids' church as well, and it's always so beautiful. One thing you said there was that we often place our expectation of what someone of determination or on the spectrum will look like because of our previous experience. And that's probably something that you've all had or seen in some way before, because, well, that person surely doesn't have autism because they don't look like that person that I know who did. Is that something that you feel that we could do? How do we address it with the church? How do we tell people, hang on, they don't all look the same? What is it that we're kind of missing here?
I think a simple way of looking at it is the word prejudice. So when we have an experience, let's take, for example, race. If we have an experience with a different culture or tribe, it could be good or bad, we will always associate that culture or tribe with that good experience or that bad experience. And so it's the same thing with people who are different. And so sometimes we allow labels to create prejudice towards other people, and that's not fair. And so I think the most important thing to remember is that we're all just human beings, and it all comes down to relationship. And so we need to see each other first before we see our labels or our race group or our gender or whatever preconceived idea you have of a label of someone. And I think an amazing example of that is actually Giselle's foundation, which is Neoni, which means see me, not my label, what I look like, where I come from, my social class. I'm just a person. Get to know me, and then you'll learn how I am and how you can be around me.
Yeah, that's great. Thinking about labels as well, that's something that a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with using terminology. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to phrase it. Is it okay to say you are a person with autism, or you are an autistic person, or and I think that holds people back from creating some relationships because they just don't know how to phrase it in fear of hurting someone's feelings or upsetting someone. Tara, have you got anything to say around that labeling idea and how we can best approach it, or just learn? I mean, this is what we're here to do, is to learn. So how can we change the way that we think about this, and how can we do it in a way that's going to be encouraging and supportive for people that we know?
I think the honest truth is that language does change and evolve, because I look like myself when I started my training as a psychiatrist, and I look at some of the older diagnostic classifications, and you will describe some of those children as educable or non-educable. And that isn't a textbook, that is an official, I remember starting my training in Ireland and looking at some who had been in institutions for like decades, and you go and open their file, and that was still like the diagnosis. But of course, over time, people have understood that some of those language are pejorative and stigmatizing, and therefore have moved to a bit more non-judgmental and non-literal language. So I guess as part of our education, it's good to understand and to be familiar with what are the languages that are used. So I know here in UAE, you use people of determination. And that's something at least that, if you use that, that is a common language that everybody relates to. And if you're not sure, then, just ask. Again, I think it's coming to that place where the more we understand that this is not about saying you have to be an expert in this subject, because you cannot be an expert in everything. But like in other areas of life, when you're curious and you sensitively and respectfully ask about what you don't know, then people talk you through it. And I think when people see that it's born out of genuineness and and curiosity and sensitivity, then you get the response. So a lot in sort of thinking medically, where we use intellectual disabilities or neurodevelopmental disorders, or sometimes we use the the terms typical. And some people say, "Oh, should I use typical?" But a lot of the time we go back with differences. Just understanding that we're different. Some are tall, some are short, some are big, some are slim. Difference is what we do, and we all understand differences. So when we, and sometimes they will use neurodiversity or neurotypicals as a way to describe these things. But I think more importantly, if we move away from some of the clearly pejorative terms and go to something a bit more neutral, I think will be a safe bet. But also, we need to understand that those languages have changed, as in many other areas of life, and we need to at least try and educate ourselves and make sure when we are discussing it, we use this right term, so at least people then are familiar with what the terms are. Yeah.
Yeah. It being.
Oh, okay.
I think that was my next question.
Okay. More towards, okay. I'm looking at her now.
I have to answer the question. Should I sit here maybe? Then you can look here.
But then it will be the end of
Next to
you.
your wife, like
Okay.
more close to your wife. Okay. React.
Oh, this side.
Because this curve is gonna.
Oh, it's okay.
Is good. Thank you.
Is this better? If I sit here, should I sit here? Or we are this?
More to the right. Oh, you can move a little bit
Does he have to answer the question again?
straight.
Wow.
So look straight
Look at me, rather. Okay.
when I'm out. Okay.
So we can carry on, or do we have to retake that?
We'll just carry it. Okay. Okay. We talked earlier about unseen illness and disabilities, and it's one thing that I don't think we're dealing with well in the church. I don't know what the answer to it is, but I often feel it's one of those things that we just put in the category of just pray for it. And I'm not sure if that's because we don't know what else to do. And I know that's something I can get better at in how to support people and how to help people. But what is it that you think we could be doing better when it comes to the unseen disabilities that people are living with day to day?
I think fundamentally, if we go back to our understanding of what illness or sickness or diseases or whatever we want to call it, and oftentimes in our minds we separate physical illness from emotional or mental or neurodevelopmental illness. But we know that from scriptures teach us clearly that illness is as a result of the fallen world. And when God created all things in the beginning, everything was perfect, and then illness came. And on this side of eternity, we have to work with it until it comes and restores everything there. But the other thing I also want to point out is if we look at, yes, even though it's taking us time, even within the church, to look at physical health and how we support people with physical health, but we have come a long way. And I like to use the example of, let's say, somebody breaks his leg. If somebody breaks his leg, nobody goes up to him and say, I lay hands on you and that leg is whole now. If your doctor says put it in plaster of Paris and don't use it, don't bear weight on it, and you don't. So nobody expects them to go and start running on a broken leg, because at least we have that understanding that there is a recovery period and there is a process of healing. And so you don't say that person is lazy because they're not running after 1 week of fracturing their legs, or say, oh, why are you not jumping up and down? Because we now understand that there is a process of recovery. But rather, and many of us are not orthopedic surgeons or doctors, you can't do anything. But we know there are practical things you can do to work with them, to help them realize that I identify with you in your struggles and I can do something. So, okay, I give you a lift because you can't drive now. We'll get some food for you. If somebody suddenly develops cancer, we know what the treatment is going to involve and how it's going to impact them. So I usually encourage and challenge us, let's think about what we do in those physical health conditions. There is a role for us to play in just being with people. If we try and strip it down eventually to what is the baseline, I think we have a conversation in therapy where it says irrespective of the model of therapy you're using, having an engagement with your therapist and feeling you're with somebody where you feel safe, you have that unconditional acceptance, and somebody who you think understands you is almost like half of the importance of that delivery in itself. So there's something about just being with people having a sense of genuinely connected and concerned and working with me. When we talk about the story of Job and we talk about, just being sitting there with him and just knowing you're there, not mocking him or coming to judge them or coming to make different expressions, but just being there for them. And so that's why sometimes I like to use the example of physical health, like, when people, have a physical illness, or maybe when, people are through grief or things like that, where we just go and be there with them. You're not going to bring the dead person back, but you know what it means to be with somebody in their time of sorrows, cry with them, stay with them, physically comfort them, prepare all the physical things they need just to be able to get through that. You're not going to change the situation, and none of them are expecting you to change it. That's not actually the expectation of the people with determination or their carers. They're not expecting you to come and fix it. They just want you to be there with them and just to walk with them. And that's what Jesus demonstrated for us. When the disciples were busy asking him, who was sinned? Is it the blind man? Is it the father? Is it this? And Jesus was saying, God just wants to be glorified here. Just compassionately deal with this person, move them on, and let them know that they matter. When everybody was shouting to blind Bartimaeus, keep quiet, the Lord doesn't have time for you. Jesus turned around and says, no, I've got time for you. What can I do for you? How can I be of help to you? What will make a difference in what you're going through? I think if we simplify it to that level, then at least we understand that on a human level, we're there to be a community. We're there to support one another. We're there to work with one another in all the situations we're going through. I think for me, in my personal experience in church, is that one of the things that gets in between this is some of our theology. Because if in your mind you already think this is like a spiritual attack, I've got to go in and that's all I can do for them, then that just becomes your focus and almost becomes, that's a project you have to do and you can't see anything else. And sometimes you don't even realize that your offer of prayer can be quite undermining and insensitive and almost judgmental rather than something that actually gives grace, encouragement, and strength. But if you come at it from a very different perspective, then that can happen. So let's understand that and understand that it's important to work with one another. And I think if we start from there, we'll be amazed where we can go. The love of God has been shed abroad in our hearts by the Holy Spirit. And He expects us to express that love to everybody within our communities. And that includes people of determination.
There is so much stigma attached to mental health and those unseen things. And I think part of what the church has done in that is to make it seem like you said, it's always a spiritual attack. Oh, you're depressed, it's a spiritual attack. And we approach it like that rather than, actually, I'm just going to support you and care for you. And, I'm not going to say your broken leg from a football injury is a spiritual attack. That's just the consequence of your actions. But we seem to put, those unseen things in a different basket. So it is really interesting to hear from that perspective. When we had our very first All Are Welcome service, beforehand we were praying and someone said to me, all we need to do here is pray for healing. That's all we should be doing. And I was so disheartened and I thought, what do I say to this? Because it just, for them, it just narrowed down to just pray for healing and we can sort of be done with this. And I thought that's actually what we're dealing with. And that's the approach that a lot of people have. What do we say to that? And how do we discuss that in a church in a way that is kind? I didn't want to shut this person down, but I was feeling really like, how do I go? Where do I go from here?
I'll take this one.
Okay.
I think it's so important to know who we are and what we understand about things. But it's also so important to know who God is and what He's here for. And often we think God is a genie that we can tell what to do. and he's just going to make it all happen. That's the first thing. And sometimes God doesn't want us to be healed. I think we were sharing this yesterday, is that God can perform miracles, but he will do that to give himself glory. He might heal you over a process of time so that he can change things in you and refine you and make you a better person. But sometimes he may never, ever heal you again for his own glory. So he's not our genie, and we can just say, heal this person now, and he's going to do it. Yes, he can, and we can ask for it, but it might not be something he wants, and it might not give him glory if he did, so he won't. The other thing is, I think it's important to understand, how do we see disability or any struggle? And again, we've been learning about the different ways that people have changed their perspective on struggles and needs. And so it was the very early church, and even cultural tribes were always assigned disability to a curse or a punishment. And so if that is the case, then it's just a matter of intercession and stepping in to pray and removing that. But we've come a long way from there. And it's not people's fault that they are disabled or injured or hurting or suffering. And now we need to get to a place of, okay, is something that I'm doing creating that disability for that person? And if it is, how do I then help them? And yes, we can pray. That is one way. But there are so many other things that we can do. And I hope that through our All Are Welcome programs, services, that this person is starting to change their mind. And we shouldn't judge them, because we all come from backgrounds where we started off thinking that way, and we've learned better, and we've experienced things and gone through things to change our frame of reference. And so this person is also in need, and they are in need of love, and they're in need of our compassion, and also our showing and teaching them how to be better.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to add anything to that?
I think I like the way you answer that question. Is very important. I like the explanation you've given. But the little bit I'll add on to it is that sometimes we say, let's just pray, because it's just a way of pushing or burying things under the carpet. But also, just using that example of Jesus Christ, he said, whatever he saw the Father do, he was doing. He did. So even when we are saying we're praying, it's actually asking God, what do you want me to do in this situation? It might be, okay, yes, pray this way, or maybe go and do certain things, do this and this. So it's good to we should always acknowledge God in all our ways, but it's not asking or demanding that he does things in this way. Is really coming to him with that issue. Okay, in this situation, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to pray about? Or how do you want me to go about this? Is truly acknowledging God and having a heart that is open, and also knowing that God may just be telling you to do something that is practical and not just go on your knees, which is important. But the most important thing is doing things his way.
Yeah, and I think so, and that's an important thing, because even if we drill down to pray in inverted comma, what exactly do we mean by that? Oftentimes, that's a way of assuaging our own guilt or our sense of helplessness or a sense of not knowing what to do. Yes, and when we don't know what to do, we can go to God in prayers, but our prayers should be open and honest and genuine, not, just feeding into our own prejudice or mindset alone. So it could be an opportunity of being open and asking God, I remember praying for somebody in this context, and the Lord opening, pray for them for strength for what they have to go through. And you think you were going to pray for the child, and you say, ask them about how they're doing in their relationship. How is this impacting on your marriage? And suddenly you're realizing something else, and you're bringing wisdom into that. You're bringing validation into that. You're helping them to see that actually what you're going through is real, and it's real. And you can then speak strength into that. Out of that can even come, maybe there are practical things we can do to support this, or maybe even advice, or you could signpost them. So again, let's not hide under this level of prayer and spirituality not to address what we see as difficult and hard conversations or hard questions. Let it be a genuine openness to actually seeking and pulling into the wisdom of God so that it can give us insight and understanding of how we can actually be a blessing to one another. But that foundation of that has to be right, though. This is not about coming and delivering somebody and just getting rid of them or whatever. No, this is about a genuine humility and coming alongside brothers and sisters, working with them, open to what they are genuinely dealing with. You know, Scripture says we don't come with pride in any of those situations, knowing we ourselves could be tempted, we ourselves could find ourselves in the same situation. And I often say, and I think I was sharing that at the last preach, that for many of us, half of us, I don't know what we would do if we're in the situation of some of the parents or people with determination. Some of us think we have faith. But, you know, you talk to them, you walk their path, and you will see what real faith looks like in the face of the realities of daily living. Not this fantasy, hairy-fairy faith, but the real outliving and outworking of that. So I think that we will actually be humbled and learn some things about what it really means to hold on to God and trust God. And so when we come, we genuinely encouraging their faith and moving them on in a way that is really, really helpful.
Can I just add to that? I think it's good to always remind ourselves that we belong to a family. And we all play our own parts. It's like how Christ describes us each as a member of the body. And sometimes we are just too lazy to participate in the body. And so it's just easier to say, I will pray for you, or I will connect this person with you, or I think this person can help you. And people will listen to us and say, oh, they're the experts, so they can say that. But no, we might be knowledgeable, we might have studied things, and we might have pieces of paper with our names on it. But the body is moving parts that are working together to make that body functional and healthy. And so you don't need to be a doctor or have any title in front of your name. As long as you are a member of the body, you have to say, this is my body that I am taking responsibility for, and what is my role to make sure that all the parts are working together effectively and healthily. And so it comes down to, this is my responsibility. It's not the elder's responsibility, it's not the pastor's responsibility, it's not the doctor's responsibility, it's not the ministry leader's responsibility. I'm sitting here as a member of my body. What is my responsibility? And back to what we were saying, what is the smallest thing I can do in this moment as I'm sitting here and there's a screaming baby next to me? How can I help this mother who can't even worship or pray? Like, what can I do? And not be afraid, and be okay that we are a family. So again, it's just how are we seeing these things, and how are we readily willing to participate as the body?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we did touch on in our last service when Taiwo was talking about, you know, we've been given everything we need in order to live as a family and to live as that body that you're talking about. And it's just about activating those parts and making sure we're all being switched on and activating what it is that God's called us to do and what He's sort of placed in us.
Can I add something? Sorry, because something's come to my mind. So there's this African-American Christian comedian I like watching. And when he's out and about doing his shows, sometimes he just likes stopping and just asking random people in the audience just to tell them something about himself. So this particular one I watched, he stopped and he asked this couple just to tell him something about themselves. And it turned out that they had never been on holiday for maybe about 20 years. They had a child with special needs. And he paused and then he said, okay, so what do you need? And they said they just need somewhere to put their child in, to have just a rest, somewhere where the child could stay and they could go on a holiday, a respite. That's all they needed. And he later explained that he felt that, okay, he could say, I can give you the money, I can pay for you easily to go on holiday. but he felt he needed to ask them what did they need, because they had the money, they knew where they wanted to go on holiday. What they needed was where their child could go for respite. So there and then in front of the audience, he said, where are you living? And then he said, okay, so who has respite care in this area? But there and there, that need was met, and the family, the couple could go on a holiday because he was sensitive enough to ask, okay, what do you need? And they were open enough to say that this is what they needed, and the need was met there and then.
I think that heavily will bring me to the subject of respite, because it's something that is very close to my heart. I think we need to understand, for a lot of people with determination and their carers, they take the responsibility of caring for their special people seriously. And they know better than anybody else that not everybody can look after this child. Even the best parents in the world, if you have to deal with some of this today, you realize that your expertise only goes so far. So they already carry that burden. They don't want to release their child. That's why they don't want them to go to Sunday school, because they know that body, they understand it. And one of the biggest concerns for them is, I want to look after my young person, and I want to do it well. But the reality is, in order for them to do that well, they need to look after themselves. And often in my professional life, what often happens is that these carers get burnt out, and then their biggest fear then happens. They then find themselves in a position where they cannot care for their young persons or the people of determination, and sometimes have to put them in care, or things happen, out of their control. And that is almost like a double jeopardy for them, because it breaks their heart and they felt they failed in their biggest aspirations. So recognizing that for them to even accept respite is a huge thing. And therefore, we first need to understand that. So this is not like just doing it willy-nilly. It's not something they will even willingly do. So if we are not intentional, if they can just get a sense of, oh, I'm just going to be a burden, or this is just lip service, they're not going to take it, because they don't even want to go there. So if we're actually going to be offering respite genuinely, they have to see that there is a real genuineness, that they can actually walk away and not be second guessing, and even though they're physically not there, but they can't even relax or rest. They're waiting for the next, thing to happen, and they're rushing back again. So that's the first thing I want us to be very clear about, so that there is a responsibility on us to understand what it means for that. And so all this training, understanding, is to put ourselves in a situation where we can assure them and say, genuinely, because we know that what you want to do to look after your child, if you're not looking after yourself, you can't do it. And so when we're offering to help you out, or make sure they have some time in church and you can relax and do it, this is our way of saying we support your vision to be whole and able to do this. And so therefore, we're increasing our knowledge, we're increasing our understanding, so that when you hand those words to us, you can rest and switch off, and knowing that these are people who are going to look after them. And there are diverse ways we can look at that. And I look forward to a church where we're falling over ourselves to offer genuine respite. Whether it be an hour, whether it be a day, whether it be a weekend holiday, in these different dimensions. And that's what I mean, that these are many things that many of us can. Some of them, they go to things with your child. If there's somebody that I knows my child enough, I can comfortable enough, I can drop that child and go for an hour and have coffee, and not just be waiting on my phone call. I can actually switch off for an hour. It can be so refreshing. So that's an area where I will love us to think as a community. So when we see, for example, coming into Sunday school, it should be a genuine respite. The mother should not be sitting in church thinking the next 2 or 3 minutes I'm going to get somebody coming. No, he knows these guys are so clued in with me. When I go into church and I hand that my child for 2 hours, I can almost get lost in the spirit for 2 hours and know that, they're genuinely going to be able to do that. That's going to take some work. And I want to set that as a challenge for us, not for the child or the parents or the people of determination. That is a challenge for the church. If we're saying we are with you, we're body with you, we need to take that. And it's our job to convince them that they can trust us with their people to look after them, so that they can really have genuine respite.
Absolutely. I think that respite in church is the starting point, isn't it? Like the platform of where we can start something and make sure that people can have a genuine and a great experience at church, and not feel always that they're pushed to the side. That's amazing. Anyway, thank you so much for sharing your insights and for sharing all your stories. And I think we have learned so much from hearing from all of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.